So welcome back, everybody, or welcome also to those who this is your first meeting to the Spark HL7 AU Core Technical Design Group. This is our first meeting for 2025. And I wanted to start this meeting by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we all gather today. And for me in Brisbane, that's the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara peoples. We pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging, and extend our respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And we acknowledge the First Peoples as the first scientists, educators and healers. As this is the first meeting back for 2025, we're going to do a quick run through of the technical design group itself, the fact that there are terms of reference, who the co-chairs are, and also do a quick run through of the AU Core FireIG project before we move into what is the usual business and updates that we go through in every meeting. Then we're going to go through the last set of content for AU Core R1. This should be our last meeting talking about it. And then we're going to go into AU Core R2, which will be largely around the scoping workshop, and then finish the meeting with how we're going to move forwards with what has come out of that scoping workshop and the work that we're going to do in order to develop AU Core R2. So because this is our first meeting for 2025, I'll just do a refresher for everybody in terms of, Zoom etiquette. So what would be really great is for everybody online to have your name and then in brackets the organisation after it. And that makes it a lot easier, I think, for people when you put your hand up or when you put things in the chat to see that who's speaking and what that background is. As we go through, you can raise your hand using Zoom reactions to ask a question. If you've dialed in, so you don't have the option for Zoom reactions, you can just go off mute and ask a question, and that's fine. We'll come back to you on that. I do want to just remind everybody, all our meetings are recorded. So everything from the AU Core Technical Design Group are recorded. We have the minutes, we look at attendees, and they form part of the record of the standards process. This is an open standards process. And you can post questions or comments in the chat. Other people will respond to you. But I want to call out for people here that if what you're raising in the chat is actually better discussed and minuted, then it's probably better to put your hand up rather than just leaving it in the chat, because I, as chair, or maybe the person who's facilitating, might not be able to be monitoring the chat. And so we don't want to miss out on anything that is better, I guess, addressed and discussed in detail during the session. So we're going to go through the AU Core Technical Design Group. So I want to highlight here kind of like an overall framework. So this is a Spark HL7 AU Core Technical Design Group. We're currently on this diagram down here. We are a technical subcommittee that's underneath the direct governance of the Australia Fire Work Group. We're a sibling to the AU e-requesting Technical Design Group. We currently have 2 projects we're looking after. We are the responsible group for the AU Core FireIG and for the AU Patient Summary FireIG. Our governing group, the Fire Work Group, is also responsible directly for a number of projects, but for our purposes, they're playing a governing group. So we report back to them at some key points, including things like publication approval, approval around ballot. They provide direction to us in terms of process, and also sometimes in terms of what needs to be included in the content of AU Core. And above all of that sits the board, the HL7 Australia board, which also provides that overall direction and the governance framework for Australia. So there's some links here. These slides will be available soon. We've got links right through, I guess, from HL7 International, which has this great page called HL7 Essentials, which has like the governance and operating manual and a whole bunch of content, which is essentially adopted and localized in Australia. And in HL7 Australia, there is this page that I've put the direct link to, which sets out all the governance documents that are localised and produced also at operational level in HL7 Australia. We use those forms as we go throughout the process. And in fact, we're going to be using one of those forms pretty soon to enact the publication process for AU Core. The Firework Group, which is our direct governing body, has a page on Confluence, which sets out its terms of reference, when it meets, records of those meetings, records of what they've discussed that we've brought to them or that come back down to us. So there's a link there for people to have a look. And of course, we have our own page, and I'm going to go through that in a little more detail later on. So I'm just putting the link here, and we'll come back to that. So we have terms of reference there on our homepage. These were approved, I think, just in November, I believe. Was it November, Marvin, that we ratified this? December?
Yes, it was November.
Okay, so these go through an annual cycle of review. So we went through and approved this version of the terms of reference. This is a small excerpt of it in terms of our mission and charter. And they're also now open for feedback as well, so that we can incorporate over this annual cycle any further improvements or considerations to that will be brought back into these calls periodically to discuss what changes, be they standard changes or just clarification on the wording to our terms of reference. And we also have a set of co-chairs. Right now, there's 6 co-chairs. So that's me, Danielle Tavares-Rickson. So I'm the fire lead for Sparked, and I am a co-chair for the AU Core Technical Design Group. We've got a number of the other co-chairs online in this meeting, so I'll just call them out. So we've got Andrew from Epic, Landon is joining us from Best Practice, Marvin from Telstra Health. We've got Tim from the Australian Digital Health Agency, and Michael from Oracle. So that's the current set of co-chairs. So you'll see us around, and co-chairs do the administrative job, facilitation job. We'll chair each of the meetings and also manage the tracks going through for AU Core in the Connectathons as they come through. So if you have any questions about the AU Core Technical Design Group, please speak to one of us, and I'll put up the mailing list soon. But you can also just, if you see one of us around, come say hi, sit down and have a conversation with us. So I wanted to call out this part of our terms of reference, and this part is the same across all the HL7 Australia work groups. So that includes the Firework Group, the AU Core Group, and e-requesting. All adopt the HL7 AU decision-making practices. So this is an open community group that is going through and making design decisions around a set of fire specifications and requirements. And we bring all of those through this group in a decision-making ceremony. So when we record decisions, what that happens is through a motion. So someone will motion. We'll know what is that motion and who has motioned it. There will be a seconder, and it'll go through majority vote in this group, which when we're in a virtual call, we'll do through an online poll. So we'll come to one of those later in the meeting, and I'll pop up an online poll, and we'll ask everybody on the line to select affirmative, negative, or abstain for the current motion that is under vote. There is a link there. It's a fairly detailed document that goes through when and how we can have electronic votes, what any of the quorum is, and all that kind of content. But I won't go into detail now.
Prior experience.
Sorry, Natasha, you might need to go on mute.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. So this particular meeting, so we'll be having fortnightly meetings on Thursday, is the main call for the AU Core Technical Design Group, and it goes through 2 things. So overall, AU Core Technical Design Group governance administration. So that's our terms of reference, That's our decision-making practices and procedures. That's the set of co-chairs, any elections or appointment for that. There is an agenda item for this to proposing interim appointment of an additional co-chair that we'll go through later on. That happens in this call. And we also do oversight of the projects that this TDG is responsible for and then reports up to the firework group. And the other aspect we do is we do handle the design calls for the AU Core Fire IG in this call. So we'll go through those on the Thursday fortnightly. There is another meeting series which specifically does the design calls for the HL7AU Patient Summary Fire IG project. That happens on Fridays, so there's one tomorrow morning. If you are interested in those and aren't yet signed up for that, you can, through the Sparked registration form, indicate your interest in it and get on the mailing list and invites for that particular meeting series. So that was a quick run through of our TDG. Let's talk about the AU Core Fire IG project. So this is all within the context of Spark the Fire Accelerator. I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail on the Sparked Fire Accelerator, but I will call out that for the AU Core Fire IG project, that in itself is a pillar of the overall project that is being worked through Sparked on AU Core, which includes work on AU CDI, or the Australian Core Data for interoperability. There's AU Core. There is a set of validation and piloting and testing that is undertaken that supports and follows along with the various projects. There's also a set of services that is maintained that does that ongoing. And we'll talk about those much later, I think, in the year again. And there's some terminology work going on. Overall, Sparked is looking at, I think, three projects from our purposes. So we have AU Core e-requesting and patient summary. But of relevance to the AU Core TDG main calls is that we'll be doing the design content around AU Core itself. So I'm not going to spend a lot of detail on what is AU Core, but just refresher for people that AU Core is a implementable standard for fire interfaces. It goes across both patient systems, provider systems, and it's looking at the foundational aspects across a whole bunch of common concepts. And that includes allergies, it includes medications, it includes immunizations, procedures, vitals, and we draw those clinical information requirements from AU CDI. It also forms the basis for use by stakeholders when implementing fire for a common implementation across multiple projects. There it is. So what we do when we do these design calls is essentially we come together and we discuss and agree on a set of rules about how fire resources are used for the core digital health and administrative data for that exchange, and also build out the necessary documentation to support and clarify usage. And so that surfaces in things like profiles and extensions and terminology decisions, which are the rules that the data conforms to. And it also surfaces in things around actors and capability statements, around extending or defining search parameters, possibly even operations, which are about the rules for interacting with the data, which essentially form a RESTful API. And then we also work on things like adding in guidance. And I think that will probably be a fairly significant feature of AU Core R2 as a maintenance release, where we will build upon the work we've done in AU Core R1 and through implementation experience end up building out a set of guidance materials to enhance that content. Now, we work together with the clinical design group. The clinical design group who's responsible for AU CDI. Sorry, Jojo, you'll need to go on mute. We work with them in order to understand our clinical context, a set of clinical information requirements, and looking at the data priorities that are being driven through the clinical community. We also need to review and provide input into AU CDI R2, which the work is ongoing now, and there is a draft out for review. I think Kylie will talk to that. We also then work across both adopting and harmonising other Australian content, so in AU base, and drive work items necessary to support our outcomes, as well as looking at the international specifications and harmonisation. So what's out there in the fire standard, where can we suggest and put through improvements, be that into the fire standard itself, or in a set of terminologies, whether that is managed through HL7 terminology, or whether that's SNOMED or LOIC. Last little bit around this. So expectations. We hold fortnightly meetings. So there's the 90-minute fortnightly online meetings. They're Thursdays. This is our first one for this year. There'll be quarterly face-to-face. The next one for this is the February, which we sent out the email for that, I think, at the end of last year. There's connectathons, which are also roughly quarterly. There's usually 3 or 4 each year, and there'll be some information around the next connectathon coming out soon, I think. And we often hold some testing events as needed in order to support implementation and testing of the draft specification as we build it out. And of course, ballot, because we're in the business of doing the standard here. So all of this leads through into a set of ballot activities to go through and do the consensus-driven work around the standard that we have developed throughout the year prior to publication. So I'm going to hand over to Kylie here. Kylie from the Clinical Design Group has joined us to lead off discussing the relationship between AU CDI and AU Core and the Clinical Design Group and the TDG.
Thanks, Danielle. Hi, everyone. My name is Kylie, and I'm the clinical design lead. And I kind of lead the clinical design group to develop out AU CDI and other clinical related documents in Spark. So this, as Danielle mentioned, is that high-level relationship between AU CDI, AU Core, and the processes. So like the TDG, the CDG is also looking at other national, international standards. We look at, but we also look at our state and national requirements around clinical data, and we bring together the expertise from the clinical design group to understand those clinical requirements for whichever use cases we are looking at the time. We bring those together and do a process of prioritization and development, and that outputs as our AU CDI and our AU CDI backlog, and that's what we. Sorry, Yoni, could you please go on mute? And so that kind of comes together, and we pass those over to the technical design group to think about those as the clinical information requirements, and that kind of feeds into the prioritization process that Danielle was talking about before. And Danielle, did you want me to finish this one, or did you kind of want to slide into the technical requirements, the downstream project requirements, and the international standards that you guys all take together to produce your AU Core and AU Core backlog?
I think that's a really good summary, some of which then we went into more detail during the workshop, and I think I'll talk more about that in terms of responding to it. But yeah, I agree. At an overall level, the clinical information requirements and the priorities are driven from the clinical design group and provided for us for consideration and adoption. And we also have feeding into our process around harmonisation with international standards, a whole bunch of supporting downstream project requirements for AU Core at the moment that's relevant for patient summary and e-requesting, and a set of technical requirements, things that like make FI implementable, that feed into a prioritization and development of any particular release.
And then I think if you go to the next slide, Danielle, it kind of shows a diagram of a way of working, and this kind of is an example of how our patient summary, AU CDI, AU Core kind of interact, as well as it does also have AU requesting. So on the left is the clinical focus group. That's a subgroup of the clinical design group where they come together to really focus around clinical workflow, clinical scenarios, and creating artifacts that we would then use to help us build out our AU CDI R2 and R3. And then we provide those requirements and information to AU Core to go through your process to develop out your specifications. And I think this also references those downstream projects that provide requirements that Danielle just mentioned. They sit on the right and feed into your AU Core as well. These are just an indicative diagram. We do know that while these arrows are all one way, there is interactions in both ways, where AU Core will raise requirements to AU CDI, whether or not we address them immediately or they go on our backlog, but they are considerations. So these arrows do look one way, but actually the reality is we are working both ways, and there is a feedback cycle between us. Danielle, was there anything else you wanted to add? No?
Yeah.
Well, I might just move on.
No, I think that was good.
Cool.
Oh, perfect. So sorry, Rose. Yep, thank you. So I just wanted to quickly, I think as part of this recap, just recap the purpose of the CDG and our ways of working as well. So as you probably, most of you know, the Spark CDG is there to drive the development, validation and implementation of critical healthcare data standards. Particularly, we're focusing on that Australian Core Data for Interoperability, the AU CDI, but we do also look at other use cases just like the TDG, so AU requesting data for interoperability. And we're really trying to ensure that patient data is clinically meaningful, accurate, accessible, and standardized across healthcare exchanges and reporting. Next slide. This is a high-level view of our CDG community process. It shows how we've kind of gone from collecting use cases and requirement gathering through workshops, which are anyone can join. They are in person usually. It's open to everyone, so members of the digital health community, which includes the TDG as well as the CDG. From there, we after the prioritization, we start looking at drafting data models, which get presented to our CDG, which then goes through to a draft for community comment, where everything is open for people to comment. So anyone from any interested stakeholder can comment, and then that goes through a feedback process. So this diagram here is just showing where the CDG is working and also the touch points where TDG is able to provide input and where we can work together. So while the CDG is looking at the models, providing us feedback so we can make any changes that we need before it makes it into AU CDI, the TDG is also able to raise and identify issues with our data model. So these can be done sort of in our development process. We also try to keep up regular updates from AU Core into CDG. But the TDG is also able to raise new clinical content of interest for discussion by the CDG. So we do acknowledge that there is content already in AU Core that is clinical content that is in AU Core that's not yet in AU CDI. So the example that I have is medication request, and this is something that has been discussed at the CDG. It has also been raised in TDGs with CDG members present. So there is sort of a informal process at the moment. We do acknowledge, though, that there is a growing need for this kind of process or interaction between the TDG and CDG. So we are looking to make a more clearer process, a more transparent process of how those interactions can go ahead to make sure that we stay in sync and to allow some of that clinical content to go ahead if it goes through the right processes, or not right processes, but improve more clearer, transparent processes. The other thing, as part of that, we can also hold joint CDG and TDG meetings to discuss these things and make sure that we're both sides are on the same page and working together for the same outcomes. So that is the high level community process there. Danielle, was there anything else you wanted to add around the interactions between the CDG and TDG and anything related?
I think I echo everything you've said, and I think for clarification purposes for people who, especially those who are joining us in the TDG, who have come in, I think, recently, and welcome, that especially, let's just reaffirm kind of how that process goes in terms of AU CDI, and there is a R2 that is being developed. One of the things that we will consider in the TDG is we will go through every single data group and data element that is documented in AU CDI for prioritization in terms of development in AU Core, and make those agreements on where and how that could be supported, and if we can address that within a particular release or if it needs to form part of the backlog. Also, other community needs come into that prioritization process, including things being commonly implemented and needed coming from vendor community or downstream use cases. Where those are clinical concepts that aren't yet in AU CDI, that needs to be raised and discussed with CDG to ensure that we have that back and forth between the two groups, and to ensure that anything that comes into AU Core is understood and acknowledged, that either it isn't yet in AU CDI and that's accepted, or whether or not we actually reach the agreement to say, actually, we think that we can't yet put that in AU Core because it really does need further work from the CDG. So that's also going to be continuing throughout the AU Core R2 process.
And we are drafting out those processes now, and we'll be presenting those to the CDG and the TDG over the next coming weeks, so that we just want to make sure that it's really clear and transparent for everybody. Awesome. So then just this quickly, because I know we're running out of time, just the CDG scope is really around driving the development of data for interoperability, so AU CDI, AU requests, so that's identifying, scoping, prioritization of those clinical requirements, workflows and use cases. As mentioned, we'll provide clinical input insight into the AU TDG, but also if there's policy discussions as we're needed. We're looking at validating, defining some of the data elements, data groups and value sets needed for all of these DIs and FIRE AGs as required. We support the development of test data for Spark AU, so trying to help feed into the test data that you guys need to do your testing, and also assessing and developing materials to enable the clinical education and understanding of Spark as needed. So not in scope for us, FIRE AG, that's your job. We also, as much as we can, want to stay out of administrative workflows, billing information, technical concepts such as security, access, privacy, and consent, system information, system-derived information, user interface or form implementation requirements, as well as broader policy discussions regarding reforms, implementation, development, not relevant to the Spark program. And this is currently our AU CDI R2 schedule. Right now, we have an online CDG meeting after this in the afternoon, where we're looking at chronic condition management. AU CDI R2 patient summary is currently out for public review. So if anyone's interested, it's open for another week or so until the 31st of January. So if you have any feedback, you can find it on our website. It's open to everyone. We're really keen to hear feedback from everyone. So if you have time, please check out the website. You can find it there. And also the CDG is open for everyone to, so please, if you're interested, if you just want to, keep informed, or if you wanted to join the meetings, please sign up. You can find the link on our Spark website, and these are our meetings coming up. And we will have another iteration of the AU CDI R2, the chronic condition management iteration, and then we'll publish the final one out in R2. In June, at the end of June. I think that's all I had, Danielle.
Yep. Perfect. So before I move on from that, are there any questions or anything that people want to raise from Kylie while she's here about, I guess, that process and what's gone through, or how do I get involved? All right. That's not the last opportunity. You'll be seeing more of Kylie as we work through in AU Core R2 through the new things from AU CDI. There'll be presentations back to us ongoing on that. So final wrap up of ways of working before we move into AU Core R1 is I want to reiterate here. We have a Confluence page. This Confluence page is important. This is where we do our work. This has the project pages for both AU Core and for patient summary. It is where we have all our agenda and minutes. It's where we put all our proposals. It's where we have our backlog. If I was to go click on our project page, that will take us to this center set of links on all the things that you might need to find around how do I get access to Zulip, where do I find all the meetings, where is the Fire IG in and of itself. All of that content comes off this page, and it all lives in Confluence. We have a YouTube playlist. So all of these meetings are recorded and they all go on the HL7 AU YouTube channel. There's a playlist for the AU Core TDG meetings. If you want to catch up because you've missed something, you can come back and have a look. And there's also playlists for the other groups and the other calls. So there's calls also around connectathons. There's calls, there are recordings for the how-to webinars also for HL7AU. So it's worth following and having that link available to go find all the instructional videos, all the meetings, all the like launching and all the briefings for everything. Richard?
Found unmute. Can I, or how can I get to the YouTube playlists from the Confluence page? I presume there's somewhere there on that.
Should be. Let's just double check it's actually there. So if we go from the Confluence page, meetings, YouTube playlist.
Thank you.
No worries. If you Google it too, YouTube HL7 Australia, this stuff will start to come up. And from the overall HL7 page, you can see all the different playlists. I think there's about 8 different playlists for content and all their videos. So we also have Zulip. This is really important area. This is where we have our latest announcements and updates. This is where we have asked questions. As soon as AU Core, so for example, as soon as AU Core is published, there will be an announcement on Zulip doing that to say it's there, or where tooling and infrastructure is. If you have a question about AU Core, if you're like, well, I don't know, is this how I use this? Is this the interpretation? Come along and you should post that in there. This is the forum that is used internationally, so you can also participate in a set of international discussions, as well as AU Core, as well as all the other Australian projects that are going on now. And honestly, our Fire implementation guide, I can't stress enough that there is a continuous integration build that is where all our decisions will be reflected. So this is relatively up to date. It's usually maybe a week behind where we make a decision in a technical design group that this is then reflected in the current draft of the Fire implementation guide. We have a number of fantastic editors who are taking the recorded decisions from the minutes and the approved change requests in JIRA and going and actioning those on our behalf. And so this is where that is. That's where it's maintained, and it is always up to date. And if you have any feedback, we really want to draw your attention that you can provide feedback at any time. So while we hold ballot cycles, how we want to proceed is that where you have feedback on something, be that you think something could be clarified, maybe we're overly prescriptive, maybe we should consider a new work item for future, please propose a change. So at the bottom of every implementation guide, AU Core as well as AU Base, you'll also see them for international. So the Fire specification itself has this, as well as things like international patient summary, where you can submit a change into the JIRA repository that tracks specification feedback. And we really like you to make use of this as we're proceeding throughout AU Core R2. And we'll talk a little bit later on around, okay, so I've submitted a JIRA, but then what? I'll draw your attention to the Fire calendar. So there is on Confluence, if you're signed in, and you'll need to be signed in, so you will need to have gotten yourself a HL7AU account, which works across both JIRA and Confluence. So when you're signed in, you can see the calendar, and the calendar is up to date. So that's January, then there's February, and you can see coming into March that we've already got all these dates for various events. It goes across the HL7AU Fire calendar. for connectathons, for different information sessions, and it also includes some of the sparked events that are fire related are in here. So I can't stress enough that keeping up to date with this is really important to be able to make sure that you're engaging in the events that you're interested in. Mailing lists. So this is what I was referring to when I said if you want to contact a co-chair. Now, if you want to contact a co-chair, use this one. There's a little bit of a gotcha here. So there's AU Core list. That goes to everybody. So there's about 400 different people on that. So just be careful on the mailing list you're using, or if you do a reply all to something that's coming out to the TDG, that's going to go to 400 and something people. So typically this one is used by HL7 Australia itself, or by the co-chairs or by Sparks to send kind of overall announcements and updates. Things like there's an event coming, or they're announcing that there is now a review period or a way to put input into a survey. All those kinds of things come out. We'd like to keep the more specific announcements on Zulip, that chat.fire.org stream that I was showing, so that we don't just spam everybody all the time. If you want to go to a co-chair or talk about meeting minutes, then you want to use this, which is just AU Core at hl7.com.au. That will go to all the co-chairs, and it will also go to the meeting scribes and facilitators. And then lastly, you might want to use Sparked. So the Sparked at CSIRO. So this is what you will use in order to RSVP to a Sparked event rather than a HL7AU event, like a Connectathon. And it would also be what you want to use if you want to request removal from a particular Sparked group or a particular mailing list. Or if you have any further information where you want to ask questions about Sparked, use that one. Okay, so that's the end of, I guess, the refresh on our work group and how we work and what is available. Are there any questions on that before we go into usual business and move on to wrapping up our one? All right, let's proceed onwards. Okay, usual business. This is typically what we open with. So all of our other TDGs will basically start with usual business. And our first point of business is looking at the approval of the minutes of the last two meetings. So these have been sent round for review. We've got 2 sets to do today. Our one in November, I'll just bring that up on screen. I'll just click through. This was sent round for review. So this is the one at which we determined where we discussed our AFMM2 for the final set of artifacts. We also talked about preparing for the upcoming scoping workshop. So I'll just scroll through here. So all the minutes are done, documented. There's no outstanding feedback. But I will ask, does anybody need any more time to review these before we move to approve? I'm not hearing anyone. So is anyone happy to motion approval of these minutes?
I'm happy to motion approval, Danielle, Jamie.
Thanks, Jamie. Is anyone happy to second?
I'm happy to second, Marvin.
Okay, thanks, Marvin. I'll now put up the online poll for approval of the minutes from the 28th of November. You should now see on your screen an online poll. Please vote there. If you didn't attend the meeting, please feel free to abstain. This is for the 28th of November meeting. So either affirmative, negative if you think more work needs to be done on the minutes or something needs to be changed, or abstain if you, well, didn't attend the meeting. Okay, so we've got 75% of people have voted now. I'm just going to leave that for another couple of seconds. And I'm now going to count that down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I'll end the poll there and share those results. So we have, for the record, 23 have voted affirmative, 0 have voted negative, and 25 have abstained. So that motion is passed. Those minutes are now approved. I will stop sharing and we'll go on to the other set of minutes. So then there's the ones for the AU Core R2 scoping workshop. So these are the minutes of the face-to-face. These have been sent out for review some weeks ago. There is no outstanding feedback that I am aware of. That's all been incorporated. So I'll just scroll through and say that we have here the list of attendees. We have the slides that we used. We have the documented set of minutes with all our mentee here. And we've also captured the motions. Now, does anybody need more time to review this set? Not hearing anyone, would anyone like to motion approval of this set of minutes? That's the 12th of December.
I like the
I'm happy to
motion.
motion.
Sorry, Sanjeev. I'll take Sanjeev. Sanjeev is motioning. Would anybody like to second that?
I'm happy to second, Marvin.
Okay, thanks, Marvin. So I'll pop up the poll again. And so we will launch the poll for approval of this set of minutes. So that is the 12th of December, the AU Core R2 scoping workshop. Just go through. So it's only 60% of people who voted so far. So just waiting for about maybe 15 people to vote. All right, we're over 75%. So I'm going to count that down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end that poll and share the results. So 17 have voted affirmative, 0 negative, and 27 have abstained. So that motion passes and those minutes are approved. Okay, I will come back to the rest of our usual business. Thank you everyone for voting. Our next point of business is interim AU Core TDG co-chair appointment. So this was popped on the agenda and it was sent round notifying that we would like to, as the AU Core co-chairs, appoint an additional co-chair in interim until the end of the current term, which is December 2025. We're still working with HL7 Australia to understand the necessary process for elections or otherwise for the next term. But in terms of this set, we'd like to appoint an additional co-chair and we'd like to appoint Ricardo and do that through the processes that are in place, which means we bring this to this technical design group and we go through a motion, second and majority vote to confirm co-chair appointment. So can I just ask for motioning of that from an AU Core co-chair?
I'm happy to motion for Ricardo to be an AU Core co-chair. Landon.
Thanks, Landon. And is there a seconder?
Marvin here, I'm happy to second.
Thank you. So the motion is for Ricardo, who I just forgot in terms of introduction, is director from the Australian Digital Health Agency, to be appointed in interim and co-chair. I'll just put up the poll for that. Are there any additional questions or comments on that before we go to the vote? Okay, not hearing any. I'll put up the vote there. Please vote affirmative if you are happy to confirm Ricardo as a co-chair for the AU Core TDG until the end of the current term, December 2025. All right, we've got about 60% of people have voted, so just like another 10, 15 to vote. All right, I'm going to count that down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end that poll and share the results. So 35 have voted affirmative, there are 0 negative, and 13 have voted abstain, so that motion passes. So Ricardo will be added as an AU Core TDG co-chair, starting effective next week. Okay, so updates and news. Not many, which isn't a surprise. This is our first meeting back. But I do want to say AU Base is published. The official comms haven't come out from HL7 Australia yet. I think that's still being worked on. Brett, is that the case? Let's just say yes. But it is actually available. And if you look at the version history around AU Base, we have that available. That's a prerequisite for AU Core to have that published. So I just really wanted to confirm that is there and available. And we also have completed the AU Core R1 ballot. So now we're at 100% across the various, the triage, the reconciliation, and now it applied, where all the issues that have been approved through ballot have been applied to AU Core. Again, that's a prerequisite, and we'll go into a little bit more detail. Are there any other updates or news? I don't think I've missed anything. Is there anything from a HL7 AU space, Brett, Ruben, that we need to announce at this point?
I don't think there's anything pressing for me. Go on, Ruben.
Yeah, just briefly, I'm not sure if I've had the opportunity to mention this before, but HL7 Australia is now internationally recognized as a participant in the International FI community process. And accordingly, so is the Spark project and all the Spark FI implementation guides as they get published will be recognized as FCP compliant specifications, just for anyone who was interested. That's recently been agreed.
Thanks, Ruben.
Is FCP compliant?
It means you uphold the requirements to be recognized as an FCP participant project or specification. And I'll put a link in the chat so that you can see what those requirements are, Richard.
Thank you.
And by FCP, that's FIRE community process.
Thank you.
Quick announcement again. So this is so we've got a February face-to-face. I mentioned that earlier. So these tickets are available for Eventbrite. It's a CDG TDG day. So CDG is the 19th, TDG is the 20th. I think there's still maybe 20 spots left. In this particular one, we're going to go through a dual workshop around meeting the AU, how we're going to add in the AU Core R2 and the AU patient summary requirements in FIRE. There'll be a more detailed agenda in a couple of weeks. If you don't yet have a ticket and you want to join, then there's a QR code here. And you can also email sparked@csiro.au to find the link for that. Okay, let's move on to AU Core R1. So one of the things we left off from last year was the AFMM2. So we had a final set of artifacts that we were taking to test into the HL7 Australia Connectathon to confirm that we met all the necessary testing requirements around 3 independent systems across 80% of the elements for those particular artifacts. That evidence was, or that goal was met through the Connectathon. So we put out the electronic vote, which was the process we'd agreed, and that was then voted upon by the AU Core members and has passed. So that vote being 18 have confirmed affirmative to endorse that the final set of artifacts from R1 are at AFMM2, 0 negative, 0 abstain. I'm just going to call out here what that means is across AU Core, all artifacts with the exception of our requester capability statement are now sitting at AFMM2. So that one stays at AFMM1 at the moment as we bring that through, and we might see sufficient additional testing of the different capabilities during R2 development to increase the maturity assessment of that one. Or we might not, we'll see. This was then brought to the Firework group for endorsement, and that was discussed and endorsed in their first meeting back in January, which was last week, actually. So that's there, that's endorsed, and that is, of course, then made it into the AU Core R1 publication. So you've seen these steps, and I keep rehashing them in every meeting we have so far over the last like 10 of them. But let's do a last one. So last few steps of R1 to publication. We've now done, as at the end of December, the ballot withdrawal. So that was announced and came out from HL7AU. A number of people took advantage of that and have withdrawn some of their ballot comments. We completed the AFMM2 assessment, and then we've moved into publication preparation. So that has gone through and been done, just to refresh people's memory about what all of that means. So what that means is all the approved change requests and technical corrections are in and have been reviewed and made complete across the set. So we have changelog entries and updated the guidance and referral across multiple pages. We've incorporated the changes from the cross IG editorial changes. So just to refresh again in terms of memory, there were a couple of things that came out of the last ballot that were actually common, and they were discussed at the firework group level. So some of the things around menus or whether or not a particular image was used in guidance was discussed at the firework group level, and that has been flowed in to AU Core. There's also been the overall QA review and editorial review of AU Core. So that's setting out, looking through all the terminology, looking through spelling and grammar, looking at punctuation, looking at the diagrams, looking at the flow of the wording, and ensuring that when we've incorporated updates to language, that has still continues to flow on through the page and is readable and navigable. There's been an overall QA, and there's also publication branch preparation. So that's where we put together a branch which represents all those changes, including the changelog, and says, here I am, ready to go. And our last part of that we check in this technical design group is we look at the QA, the QA.html of that IG, and we run through any remaining warnings or errors to accept those to proceed to publication. It's basically the same check we did when we were doing the AFMM1 checks, to go through and accept any of the warnings that were displayed from the publication tool that was relevant to those artifacts. We do that same check with AU Core. This is a standard check, and it happens across all HL7AU specifications. So last week, that was done for AU base by the firework group, and now it's our turn this week to go through that for AU Core. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Dushi, who is our primary editor for AU Core, to run through that for this group, to confirm and accept what is in there, and agree on moving into publication. Did you want me to keep sharing, or do you want to share your screen, Dushi?
I can share my screen. That's fine.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Dushi.
Share the screen now. Please let me know if you can see that.
Yes.
Thank you. So, hi everyone. For anyone new here, I'm one of the editors for AU Core. I have to apologize, my laptop got updated last week, and since that my camera stopped working. But since we're sharing screen and presenting off the screen, it's not a big issue. So as Danielle mentioned, we are reviewing the QA report for AU Core R1 today. This is actually an HL7 Australia publication process requirement that any errors and warnings remaining in the QA report are accepted by the TDG before the IG can proceed to publication. As Danielle mentioned, this is the activity that the firework group went through for AU base a week ago. We are doing this now for AU Core R1, and we'll continue to do this for every single publication. So the QA report is included for every IG. Every IG has one. It's included in the file called QA.html, It's produced by the publishing tool that's called IG Publisher during the build process. So basically, the tool applies various checks during the build and summarizes results of all those checks in the QA report, including counts of any errors and warnings or any information messages. It also includes a number of other things, but for the purpose of this walkthrough, we are not going to be running through those aspects today. So we'll skip through this and go to the summary table. As we can see, there's no errors in the QA report, and it also shows the count of 0 warnings. Even though it says 0, there are actually some resolve warnings in the IG, which are the subject of today's review and approval. I think at this stage, it's important to note how the tool generates these warnings. So basically, they're done or generated to say, hey, have a look at this. It's not actually an error, but it is something that needs to be looked at. So the IG Publisher does this as some kind of a flag to draw the attention to something for then human to look at action in some way. It's also important to know that the IG Publisher is a tool, and as every other tool, it continues to evolve over time. And as it does, we'll see different warnings in the QA report. Some of the warnings will go away. There will be new ones. So we will be going through these QA reports many times from now on. So we'll be back here for AU Core R1 and every other HL7 AU publication. As the editors of the IG, we look at the QA report all the time. It's actually a very useful tool. So we do this through the development process and make sure that all issues or warnings are addressed in some way. So in doing this, we annotate the warnings to include details of why and where they're included. So then we can review it and accept this as a group. And as Danielle said, we've done this for the FMM decisions in AU Core, where we looked at the QA report and at an artifact level. So when we annotate these warnings, the IG Publisher actually puts them in the list of suppressed messages, as it takes them as resolved and not active anymore. This is why we have a count of 0 here, but they're actually included in the report as suppressed issues. I actually have a QA report for CI build open here, so I can show you what a QA report without these annotations looks like. So there is actually a number of warnings here, informational messages, and details included in the QA report below. So going back to AU Core R1 QA report, we will skip past these information messages, as that's not the job of this publication approval. So we'll skip down to the warnings that are included. We do have a few annotated ones. I think at this stage, I should say that as AU Core builds on AU Base, some of these warnings are inherited from AU Base. These have been pre-approved by the fireware group that's already gone through and assessed this set of warnings. And as we go through the list today, I will call out the ones that have been pre-approved by the group, or if the TDG themselves assessed and approved these warnings, I will call that out too. So today, what we're doing is to confirm that the warnings that don't have any approval yet are accepted by the TDG. So we'll go through them in order. I'll identify where something has a pre-approval and why. Questions are welcome, but we probably won't have enough time to go through in any detail. But but I think if there is enough interest, we can look at organizing an informational session where we can look at these QA reports in details. We can look at AU Core and AU Base, or maybe even some other IGs that people want to bring in or point to, and we can go through it in detail and discuss how it all works. And so looking at warnings, let's go to the first one. That's about IG publisher finding multiple matching profiles among two choices. This is actually an AU Base warning that's inherited in AU Core from AU Base. It's the one that's been pre-approved by the Fiverr group. So I'm not going to go into details of this warning in particular, but as I said before, if there is interest, we can look at organizing an information session and we can go through it all in much more detail than what we are going to be doing today. So the next one about the examples with PBS concepts is also an AU-based warning. It's also been pre-approved by the Fiverr group, inherited in AU Core from AU Base, as it will be inherited in every other HL7 AU FAR IG that's based on AU Base. So we are not going to go through it in detail either. Then we have two more warnings. One's related to best practice recommendation, and the other one is related to HTML fragments missing from the IG. These are also inherited from AU Base. These have also been pre-approved by the Fiverr group, so we don't need to look at them in detail. And finally, we have one that's AU Core. It's actually the only one that's about AU Core. Why is it included? AU Core defines rules around missing data and suppressed data as an implementable spec. So when we include an example for it, the IG publisher is doing its usual check, and then it does a warning to bring to our attention something that it thinks we should look at. So in this case, it's looked at the example and it said, oh, this element doesn't actually have an actual reference or an identifier, which is exactly the point of this example as it's missing data example. So that's what the warning's about. The IG publisher is really doing what it's supposed to be doing and bringing things to our attention. We actually want to trigger this because that's the whole point of this example. So it's fully expected in the QA report for the AU Core. So that brings us to the end. That's actually the only warning that relates specifically to expected AU Core behavior that needs to be accepted today. So at this point, I think I'll ask if there are any comments or questions people would like to ask. And if not, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the list of warnings for the AU Core IG and we accept the publication.
Thanks, Joshi. We've got a question there from Andy.
Yes.
Did I see the warning about English versus Australian English as a warning?
It is an information, actually. There is an information about that. Let me find it. This one. And it's an information message.
Did you get to the bottom of that? Because I've removed it from my IGs and it doesn't get produced anymore.
I think Michael Osborne and Michael Lowley were looking into this, but as so it's information, it's just considered as a note by the publisher. So we didn't do anything about it in the IG itself. And yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Michael.
Okay?
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah. So it's to do with how IG Publisher passes off validation to onto server, and it's sort of with Graham Group to look at. Onto Server doesn't accept en-au as a language because Snowbit CT doesn't have that as a language. It's en, or there's another way of passing this language through to Onto Server. So that's still being looked at. I can actually put in the chat the exact chat from Zula about that, if you like.
That would be great, Michael. Can you pop that in the chat for people who are interested to, I guess, follow along about IG Publisher and I guess this specific topic in relation to it?
Hey, can I ask one more question?
Please go ahead.
Yes.
I'm presuming I haven't looked at the detail, but was there a decision then in base about the use of the older style of my mind's gone blank. The older style of
Oh, is it the pattern stuff?
yeah, the pattern versus value.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
accepted for AU base for this release. It will be looked at, I guess, in the next release. So it's a deferral because it's not an error. It is a future, it's a flag to say you want to consider this in future because future versions of Fire deprecate that aspect.
Does it come through as a warning or just information?
Information.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's fully valid in R4. This is an R4 IG. So it's like a hint for this is going to be coming soon. Pay attention to it because in R5 you may need to change. Well, you will need to change, but it's fully accepted for R4.
Yeah, the problem is it's quite viral because everything that then subsequently uses it ends up with the same warning or information.
Thanks, Andy. Any other questions?
Maybe you do want it to be viral because you do want everybody to know that that change is coming.
Yeah, I think that's why they chose to flag that even though it is valid, to flag it as an information for people to be aware of in the list so that that can be considered. And that makes a lot of sense. All right, it doesn't look like there are any further comments or questions.
Okay, can I then make a motion that we accept this list of warnings for the AU Core IG and we accept the publication of AU Core R1?
Thanks, Joshi. Would anyone like to second that?
I'll second that, Richard.
Thanks, Richard. I'll just bring up the poll now. Are there any other comments or questions before we move to take the vote? All right, I will launch that poll for the current motion to accept the warnings presented here and move to publication of AU Core R1. All right, we've got about 68% of people now, 70% have voted. So just going to give it just another second or two. All right, I'll count down now from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end that poll and I will share the results. So we've got 35 have voted affirmative, 0 negative, and 4 have voted abstain. So that motion passes. Thank you very much, Sushi. Thanks. Yes, I agree. Multiple, yes, celebratory things. And thanks very much, everyone. That is, that's essentially the result in the content in AU Core R1 that we can now move forwards with this to publication and bring to the Fire work group next week. So that is amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will stop sharing my screen now.
Yes, I should pick that back up. Okay, so with 15 minutes to go, I'd like to address the our agenda. There will be a few items that we're going to need to hold over to the next meeting. In terms of AU Core R1, I would like to finish that off, which is with Connectathon. Landon will need to squish your presentation back to that. And then I think we need to talk about overall next steps. I think the bulk of the report back and discussion on the results of the AU Core R2 scoping meeting will need to be left to our following meeting, because I don't think we have time to go through it in the next 15 minutes. So I'll just, Landon, are you happy for me to share my screen and just you direct me for
sure.
doing the report back on Connectathon R1, and then we'll wrap all up the R1 discussion? Thanks.
No, sounds good. So about 2 minutes, you reckon? Just quickly get through it?
Oh, if you could do it, yeah.
Okay, all right, I'll try. So last December's AU Core track had some really good collaboration and practical demonstrations. The key focuses were on testing AU Core conformance for responders and requesters across the AU Core profiles, and also generating patient summary documents. One of the key measurable outcomes we had was we achieved test coverage for AU Core diagnostic result observation, pathology, and vital signs. And these milestones, well, that milestone allow us to achieve our test coverage goals for AU Core profiles. So thank you to everyone who contributed to the test results. And that fed into the AFMM2 that Danielle talked about earlier. And a special thanks to those who helped us get over the line in the last minute with that on the day. Next slide, please, Danielle. We had a large number of responder and requester participants actively engaging in the AU Core tracks. Notably, we had more requesters providing file servers and testing results compared to previous Connectathons, which is great. And responders were supported by improved test data from Heath with suppressed data, sex assigned at birth, and they were uploaded to systems and tested comprehensively and provided back to the test results, which was awesome. We also had some crossovers to the smart track with the CVD calculator. And there were some good results with that, some good real world results. And we had some really good discussions around AU patient summary, the IG draft, and the profiles and extensions around that. And with the demonstrations, we had some really good demonstrations as well around AU Core, including like the generation of international patient summaries, exploring new implementation guides, converting JSON models to FHIR using tooling and AI, showcasing methods for rendering IPS, and the CVD calculators that I mentioned before, just to name a few. And I'd like to also mention that we recorded those sessions. So they're on the Confluence page of the Melbourne Connectathon. There's a link there, and you can actually just watch those demos if you wanted to go back and check them out. Next slide, please. And for the notable achievements, Inferno testing, we had a lot of successful past tests for Inferno across a lot of the responders. And that was a lot of increased coverage to previous Connectathons, which was great. A lot more clients as well as Connectathon, and Jamie collected that data, so thank you. And CVD calculator, there was a lot of excitement around that, and a lot of people connecting to that using the AU Core profiles and their implementations, which worked really well. And a lot of, with the FHIR servers, a lot of test data was uploaded, and that demonstrated and actually proved that a lot of the extra concepts like the missing data and suppressed data was working. And with patient summaries, there was a lot of strides in that and paving way for future improvements. We were able to generate, validate, upload to the FHIR servers, and inspected and reviewed the implementation guide draft. And as per always, we demonstrated a lot of successful connections between participant systems, which is really great. That's what Connectathons were all about. And it was a really good day, or 2 days, and these achievements reflect on the collaborative effort of everyone involved. There was a lot of enthusiasm, and it was good hands-on approach. Actually, it was a great success, and we kind of hope to see everyone at the March Connectathon. Thanks, Danielle.
Thanks, Landon. I'm going to skip through. Because, okay, there we go. There's the title slide. So that was it really for the AU Core R1 wrap up, and then moving into what's next. Are there anything that we need to bring up before I move into AU Core R2? And we'll move through some of the slides just really quickly, but we'll go through the bulk of the AU Core R2 kind of discussions of what surfaced during the scoping in our next meeting, because we don't have time today. All right, I'm going to move on. So I'm going to probably skip past a lot of this timing slide. We'll go into more detail in it in our next TDG meeting. This is the same kind of image that we're toting around and we'll keep referring back to. And I'll just call people's attention to the fact that we are going to be referring not just to AU Core, but also understanding where the downstream projects sit, both e-requesting and patient summary, from an AU Core purpose, because part of what we're doing with a foundational standard is ensuring that we are supporting the necessary downstream priorities. So we do want to make sure that our work and when and how we're doing things or making particular designs available or publishing is kind of tied into what they're doing. But I'll skip past this kind of set and into just a really brief kind of set of outcomes, and then we'll discuss in detail next meeting. So before we had our scoping discussion, we'd made one decision, which was essentially we had adjusted the AU Core inclusion guidelines to what we thought was appropriate for R2. That's on Confluence, and so that's been ratified and documented, and we took those into the scoping session. And in December, on the 12th of December, we had a face-to-face scoping workshop, which went and had a look at the AU Core backlog. And the AU Core backlog is significant because of the nature of AU Core and the broad-ranging interested effects, that there's a whole number of different items around new profiles or looking at AU CDI elements or looking at extending different capabilities or enhancements to what we're currently doing that sitting in our backlog. And one of the things we wanted to do on the day was explore the backlog, look at what is still relevant for who and why, and also what would be our priority and how could we focus the work in R2. Because that was really, I guess, the key is how do we focus across that broad set into some specifics. We did a whole number of I guess, gathering exercises across worksheets to understand who might be available to work on what and who would be interested. And we kind of narrowed some of that down. I'll just do highlights. We looked at, this is essentially, I guess, the outcomes for the focus. So in R2, we're going to do, this is essentially a maintenance release. So we are still targeting publication in January 2026. And number one priority is supporting our downstream priority projects. So across patient summary, across e-requesting, and that will be where they are feeding in requirements now. But we also need to be aware that that means throughout the life of the project. So as e-requesting and patient summary move along in their development, those things may surface and we need to be paying attention and looking at where and how can we incorporate that as we move through AU Core R2. So we're going to need to be able to pivot a bit depending on what their emerging needs are. We're also going for a goal of incrementally enhancing the AU CDI coverage. So we have a set of coverage that we achieved in R1, and we noted where we hadn't yet covered R1 content, and there's also AU CDI R2 that's out. And one of the goals, that second priority, is to do some further work on that and move forwards. And then we also want to refine through implementation experience what our existing content is. So now that it's essentially agreed, it's going to be published this month, people are going to be going through and having, I think, some real experience in looking at implementing that and how does it work and feeding that back in. And we're looking to incorporate that as we go through R2. So that's really, I guess, the overall focus for whatever we do within that period of time. We want to tie that back to one of these three priorities as our focus. Now I'm going to skip past this and we'll go through in lots of detail, but I'm just going to land here. End outcome for the day, and we'll talk about why in more detail, is there has been agreement to do 2 profiles in AU Core R2, at least to start with. 2 new ones. There's medication statement, and that's AU Core related person. Actually, I think I've got an overall summary page. Aha, here. Okay, so end goal, we're going to focus on this. We've already got 2 new profiles, related person and medication statement so far. There may be more depending on what needs come from e-requesting and what further needs come from patient summary. We are going to incrementally enhance AU CDI coverage, starting with at least medication use statement, which is tied in with that medication statement profile. So look at those together. And we're going to look at enhancement of existing content, I guess, as it comes on. So we're looking at people who will be creating JIRAs or raising, hey, this item here, this feedback, we need to discuss and actually refine that throughout R2. So that's going to be an ongoing item. Now I'm kind of rushing through this because what I wanted to get to is this bit. So in terms of, right, so we went, let's have 2 new profiles. That's great. How are we going to do it? And we want to front load that because patient summary has asked for it. So it's a priority and they want it soon. So I'm going to hand over here to Brett, who has been doing a little bit of work for prep on that, on how we can start to go through and discuss that. Brett,
Cool.
I'll speak to these slides. Yep.
I will. Yeah, cool. So we'll try and bang through this pretty quick. Yeah, so we have our 2 profiles that are coming through in R2, related person and medication statement. Just where we're kind of coming from right now, we've got, we had a previous what we call it, pre-pruning version of AU Core that had a lot of material in it that was originally culled back down for R1. So that is a resource in terms of these profiles because there were profiles for these resource types. And we're also now looking at more material from AU CDI that's come through in the meantime, and also looking at the usual things we look at with US Core as an international standard that we care about, IPS and IPA for its use in patient summaries. There is also some information from the surveys that were done originally for the draft projects, and consequently, some draft profiles have been prepared. So we have to kind of go through these, work through the elements and actually decide what to include based on all of that material, and work through what we're going to do with searching as well. So we're basically kind of in the same mode as R1, where we're going to have a profile, we're going to have obligations, we're going to have some search and read kind of capability built in. So just looking at our related person, there's no AU CDI requirements on a related person. It's not a clinical information resource. There's no IPS or APA profiles on that either. And we've got US Core as a reference there. So there's links in the slides here, so people can kind of go through and peruse this material. So I've tried to at least put all the links together to have a look at.
So
Yep.
I guess point of order is, I think what just to understand, because I don't think we want people to just have to like go open slides to. Okay, there's quite a lot of content here. So in terms of overall approach, there's, I guess, a baseline draft to consider that will be proposed in a branch, but also a set of proposed design materials relating it back to this content. Could we form an email? I think would be the better thing, to have an email putting this together to send out to the group, not just
I might just gloss through these slides because there is a link there. We'll put the links together, but there's a related person draft branch, and there's some the other material there referenced. So we go to the next slide, Danielle. We'll go through that. These are the elements there are just the ones that have been included so far, and where they're coming from in terms of their inclusion. there are some past Jira issues to think about. We will need to go back and look at any deferred issues in Jira around these things. Medication statement, there's some more things to reference there. AU CDI has information in there. There is no US core implementation of medication statement, but IPS and IPA definitely have material that we're interested in, and we should probably be looking ahead at the R5 version as well for medication statement, because there's been some changes in there as well. So we should probably be thinking about that as well in our considerations. And going forward on those slides, yeah, there's all the elements there that are kind of relevant and where they've come from. And there's some Confluence pages set up there, which kind of have a reflection of those profiles. So there's a link to the profiles, but there's also a table that sort of has some comments against all the elements and a list again of the current search parameters in the draft. So yeah, be really interested in people probably having a look at those, and you can comment directly into the Confluence pages. So there's some information there, which is just a summary of what the current profile looks like. There's a link to the profile there, just in the first line. And
so just to sum this up, there's going to be a proposal. That proposal will be, how will people know what the design proposal is? Will it be also in a set of slides come out packaged together with the email? That will then say you can put your feedback here. Is that what is being proposed?
Yeah, because basically that draft, if you click on the AU Core medication statement link there, that's the R2 draft. So that's got all of the things currently that, yeah, so there's some inclusion criteria in that table. So that's covering
okay, so that's what
all
people
the requirements.
will see. There'll be a link to a drafted branch which has a profile in it, and also here has a set of proposed search parameters.
Yeah,
and so that'll be
that
the
Confluence
case.
page just has some comments about where those requirements came from in that comments column. So that's where they've come from, and there's also some reflection of the interactions and where they've come from as well. So I think we're going to have to kind of maybe work through these elements. There's definitely more elements than there were in the original draft proposal.
Right, we're going to have to talk process,
so we're going
not
to
content, to wrap this up.
Yeah, so I think
so there will be an email that will come out after this meeting that will describe to people the proposal that people can view prior to the next TDG meeting, where they can also provide review comments onto the Confluence page if they want to do those. You will consider those and reply back to them before the next TDG. Is that right, Brett?
Yeah, that's very doable.
Okay.
So we might summarize what to do.
Go through a set of decisions around these profiles starting in our next TDG meeting.
Excellent.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. Are there any questions about that? I think, oh yeah, that's a good point, Heath. In terms of doing this content, what we did when we did it in R1 is we offered, we did an information session where in the week before the TDG, we discussed the designs. There was a session where people could come along and we could just walk through content. I'm just going to put up a poll to ask if there's any interest in running next Friday a walkthrough of those designs and just talking about how the different resources might be used and going into, I guess, more of the information session approach rather than just design decisions. So I'll launch that. Is there any interest in having one of those prior to the next TDG? All right, it looks like there's enough people who want to do that. Can I ask a different question, but I'll use this one. I guess the question, so we've typically done those on a Friday. If I created a new poll, I wonder if I can do that now to go through the time. What about Looking at the other things that usually happen, I'm just going to do a quick poll to put up timings for what might be doable. And then I'll post that. Almost done. Okay, I'm going to save that. The meeting poll. Should be able to launch that and just ask the question now. For those people who would want to attend, and I'm ending the interest one because we have enough, I'm going to launch. So this was typically on a Friday. Can you go, yeah, Friday? That's next Friday, by the way. Next Friday, let's do that. / other if you can't do a Friday.
Remembering that that's not daylight saving time on those, that's standard time.
Oh, whoops.
So
I think I probably meant to do AEDT. That was my bad.
So how do we answer it?
What are we
Whether it's
voting on?
AEST
Yeah, that's a really
or is
good question. I guess answer it as it was written, AEST,
Yeah.
because I wrote ST, not DT. So that is what you're actually replying to, yes.
Ah, well then maybe I need to vote again.
Okay, I'll end it and I'll restart. This is AEST. So I'll relaunch. Sorry for those people who had already entered it. I'll relaunch. That's AEST. So if you are in Sydney, the first choice puts it at 12. The second choice puts it at 1. The third choice puts it at 2.
No.
No, the other way.
It's
No,
the other way.
around.
Yeah, it's 2,
1
3,
o'clock
4.
in Brisbane is
why I
2
don't
o'clock
do
in
time
Sydney.
zone stuff.
Yeah,
Sorry.
2, 3, 4.
Yeah. So for Sydney people and Canberra, it's 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
2, 3, 4.
And for
Okay.
Adelaide people, you'll have to do your own conversion.
Yeah. Good luck.
Please do that. Yes. We shouldn't let me do these time polls. We really should make other people do them. I'm so bad at it. Okay, we've got a winner. We've got a clear winner. I'm going to end that poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I will share the results. That is the time. We've got a clear winner. Friday, 1 p.m. at AEST, which can someone else say what that is for the folks in
2 p.m.
Sydney, etc.? Okay,
2 p.m.
good.
Sydney, Melbourne. Yeah.
2
All right,
p.m. in
brilliant.
Adelaide, 1:30 p.m. in Darwin, 2:30 p.m. in Adelaide. Who knows in Perth? It's too far.
All right. I'm going to schedule that. There'll be an email with links and everything going out to that beforehand, and then you can come along to that one. We'll send you a meeting invite as well for an optional one so that people can come along if they want to, and we can run through a whole bunch of things related to related persons and related to medication statements prior to our design decision-making meeting, which is in a fortnight. All right, I'm going to hold the meeting there, and I apologize for going over time. Okay, we'll end the meeting there. So expect some comms coming out probably tomorrow that will put an optional invite to the meeting and also provide all the proposal information and how you can provide your feedback. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you putting up with me and my inability to do time zones. I will see you all later, and some of you maybe tomorrow morning for the patient summary call. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.